Welcome, I'm Jeff Giordano, and today we have Jose Pepe Grenada. 38 years of police experience, the majority of those years as a homicide detective. Pepe, welcome to our show. You're a wealth of experience, and we are here talking about the future of American policing today.
Excellent. Thanks, Jeff. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure being here.
Now, with your homicide experience, we've seen it in the city of Miami. The counties experience it. Other agencies are experiencing it. Back in the day, they never had the drop program. Now you have the drop program. Everybody seems to get in there when it's time to drop, and they usually stay the duration of it, which creates a big, huge gap. I think the city had 300 some people at once retiring. So it leaves an open door for rookies. And what's happening now is they don't even have any street experience, and they're getting sent to like units like homicide. How do you combat that? How do you educate rookie officers and experience them to investigate homicides with no street experience?
Sure. So, and now I'm gonna go back on my experience. So when I came on early on in the early 80s, right, there was a process to get up to an investigations unit, and you needed to do your street time. You needed to have that experience on the street. You had to make sure that your report writing was correct, always on point, and a lot of and really the passion, right? So you wanted to respond if there was, like, let's say, a natural death. You wanted to respond to that death because you wanted to see how the investigators worked it, or an unclassified or an accidental. It seems now, because of the transition and the way that policing is today, there's not much of, I'm not going to say incentive, but I'm going to say that it's easier for a young officer that has people that they know in certain positions to be placed in a unit that is difficult to investigate, even when you are a seasoned investigator, let alone someone with little experience. So when I came on, I remember there was an opening in homicide or investigations you put in for the unit, and it would go up and they would have seasoned investigators and supervisors would look at it and say, oh yeah, let's look at this individual's history. How is he on the street? How is he with his crew? How is he on the calls, complaints, and things of that nature, right? Well, it took a while because investigators needed to know that you had that interest and you had the passion. And so your name came up. And then all of a sudden your name was floated around. And then when there was an opening, they would literally come to you and say, hey, listen, if you're interested, apply.
How hard was it for you to investigate murders involving, say, a policeman's family member that one of our commanders, his mother, during a robbery was murdered? How do you address these things, or even officers that are involved in, say, suicides or homicides with a family member? How is that addressed any differently? A policeman shooting, a policeman getting killed, than a regular citizen?
Okay, so back when I was there, and I'm talking about late 80s, early 90s, police shootings were investigated by a shooting team within the unit, right? Now, FDLE handles those cases. Shootings and homicides involving officers or family members, you got to understand that a major crime, a major investigation has to be handled the same way, regardless of who the victim is. And so why? Because the integrity of that case falls on the investigator, falls on the unit, falls on the department. So you cannot circumvent or tailor any kind of evidence or whatever to tailor or manipulate to tailor a case to fall the way you want it to fall. You have to follow the evidence. So what happens in a case like that, the only thing that's different is that because it's a family member of law enforcement, you always have the law enforcement in the back of your head. And for me, I would think that any investigator would want to go to the next level to make sure that no stone is left unturned, that everything is followed to the T, And are you able to make an arrest right away? Not always. Sometimes it takes a little while, right? And the process is the same. You have to be consistent. You can't change it for one victim as opposed to the other, regardless of the circumstances.
So unrelated to the detective's investigation part, do you see like maybe say the county or FDLE processing things a little bit quicker rather than intercity homicide that might happen with a drive-by shooting?
I think that in regards to the case, let's just say, again, a major crime, the investigative process is consistent. The investigative process starts at A, ends at Z. It doesn't skip. So you have to follow every single piece of lead. So you go to the scene, and let's just say the first thing, what do? You get to the scene, you surround yourself with your crew. Once you get with your crew, you make sure that who gets assigned as the lead investigator on a particular case. You meet, you do the canvas, you do a walkthrough. You make sure and see if are there any witnesses. Because let's just be honest, no witnesses, nothing. But somebody called 911, right? So now you have contamination. Whether we like it to say it or not, someone called 911, someone was there, someone made that call. You may not have that person's information then, but that seems contaminated. So for me, you have to make sure that crime scene is secure, right? Officer safety when the officers get there. Once they secure that scene, now the investigative team can come out and start the process. And it is a tedious process. Sometimes, I always found it challenging to deal with command staff when it's what do we have? What do we have? And we haven't even been there for an hour. It's what do we have?
Sure.
Well, whatever information you got now is going to be wrong. Let me get the information that you need so you can pass on to whomever you need to pass it on to. And I don't want to give you erroneous information right off the bat and then have to call you 30, 45 minutes later and say, hey, listen, by the way, what I told you before is no good. This is what's going on. So either you're mad at me for a little bit because I didn't give you the information right off the bat, or you'll wait 45 minutes, an hour, and I'll give you the information that you can pass on, and at least it's legit.
So one of the hot topics now involving what just recently happened, the unforeseeable circumstances with Freddy Ramirez, who was the county director, police officer suicides. What experience have you had with that, mental health-wise? Myself as a hostage negotiator for 10 years with the city of Miami, a lot of mental health classes. But I'm also aware that pretty much over 90% of suicide attempts, serious attempts, they go back for a second round.
Yeah, the sad thing with suicide within law enforcement, and the numbers are staggering if you really think about it. Within the last 7 to 8 years, there have been over 1,400 suicides involving law enforcement. Now,
Are those completions or just attempts?
no, those are suicides. Those are completions. Those are officers committing suicide and dying from the result of their wounds. The sad thing about it is that is the silent killer in law enforcement. And sometimes we don't know that because we are what? We're a hyper-masculine profession. We can't have a weakness. Law enforcement is supposed to be up front, up close and personal, and can't show a crack in the armor. Well, there are cracks in the armor. Before, how would one, through a rough day, what we're going to do? Right? Choir practice.
We played football in the pig bowl back when
Yeah.
there was serious bad things. We wouldn't go out workers' comp. And one of the things I always admired, and you were the only person I knew that punted the ball backwards for negative yards. I do remember that. I had that on video, by the way.
Believe me, yes, I did, and that was. I'm glad that was my claim to fame. The funny thing that we were able to.
We had an outlet.
Vent.
We had an outlet.
We had a way to vent. Right now, it doesn't seem that way because as the new generation comes in, notice that they're more reserved. Right? They don't have that clique of a lot of guys, a lot of officers that get together. We would get together before court. We would get together to go have coffee. We would get together, and it was one of those where we would vet within ourselves, even within the homicide unit. And
we would meet after, and we'd have beers and six packs with the
correct.
crew. And now you have everybody going their different ways and clashing,
and the
it's all a
moment that
different
we
story.
and certain units still maintain or try to maintain that type of camaraderie. But with units and people responding in from home and going into service from their car, there's not really that cohesiveness. I mean, I'm not going to say that they don't get along, but it wasn't like it was back in the day,
So on the incident, like with Freddy Ramirez, he comes out and he speaks and he's talking about the pressures of police work, but in reality, looking at what happened, it was results of a woman that he was having an affair with, the domestic violence that occurred with the wife. We've seen it before. Now, they're trying to make it sound like the wife was a hero. I don't know if she was a hero for calling 911, but I look at it as a different thing being a hostage negotiator. When I see a suicide attempt involving a domestic dispute, it normally is a homicide, suicide attempt. And I kind of feel not to say Mr. Ramirez left that car that she might have been a homicide victim, but we might have been dealing with a whole different thing. So that investigation is still open where they're not releasing anything. How do you feel about the mayor putting him back in the police environment, not even in January, which is not even going to be like 3 months after an incident like this, putting him around the element, putting him around guns again? Right. How do you think officers are going to feel, and what perception are they going to get of him coming back there? That would never happen with a regular officer, by the way.
Right. So, truth be told, since I'm really not deep into that investigation, I don't know what evidence they have. I don't know what whether it was verbal or physical, what they were able to obtain. I can tell you that just from the outside, it doesn't look like it's one of those incidents where even a normal person, lay person that isn't really familiar will sit and go, that doesn't look right. So you sit and you're going, okay, I'm trying to explain how things happen. They came out with the mental, the stress, the PTSD, the stress of the law enforcement. And I always like to say that there's a million ways to handle the stress of law enforcement. You've gone through a series of things. I remember we used to go and do a psych eval every 6 months or so. We used to have a company that we would go to and see. And the thing with this incident, being placed, if you're saying that it's PTSD and it's stress related, and you've already had a significant injury, and you're claiming this to be the case, and for you to then be placed back in uniform with a weapon, if that is the case, and in charge of a group of officers, the officers have to sit there and go, really? It almost seems like because again, since I don't know the exact particulars, I can tell you that if it is PTSD, then you need to treat the situation, right? If you're claiming it because it was because of a domestic incident, then that kind of sends a bad message. Because, like you were saying, not everybody will be placed back on duty with a weapon when you're claiming that it's PTSD.
Or even around weapons. And the original call was him choking his wife. So you're investigating this incident. I know you're not involved in this one, but would you, as an investigator, I know FHP is doing it because it's on the highway, FBLE is doing it. What would be your first thing? Would you take gun residue off of her hands and his hands?
Right. So, and I'm just going to use it.
Take general homicide. You're investigating.
You're on that
you
scene.
Have a spouse there.
Correct. So the first thing you want to do is you want to secure the scene. Right. Weapon was used, so you GSR both parties, the victim and the other person that was on the scene. So why is that important? Because that lets you know if a weapon was fired, if any of the residue comes onto you from the blowback of the round, right? Now, is it 100%? No, not every time you do a GSR will you get evidence. Sometimes you do. It's more prevalent with, let's say, a revolver because of the explosion, as opposed to a semi-auto. So when you see that, that's the one thing. What do you want to look at? You want to listen to that tape. You want to get the tape, the 911. You want to talk to witnesses prior to them getting to that point. What happened at the hotel? Who saw what, and what did they see, and what can they tell you? It doesn't match. So you're trying
that
to
original 911 call is kind of like, where is that complainant at type of thing. He's, never came out forward saying that, the one that says that he had a gun to his head
right
at the hotel. It's not a coincidence that this subsequently happened.
Yeah, it was really strange the way that it is because it starts off with a man with a gun to his head. You have units that respond. You have a man with a gun in the portico where the cars are moved in and out on side of the lobby. So which one is the call? Which is the one?
I just don't understand if they're going to keep this investigation open until the new director comes in or sheriff comes in December, just allowing this guy to make money and drain the taxpayers' money with the mayor, or if they're going to close the investigation before he starts his job January 26th, I think it is, that the mayor is putting him back as the consultant. Is there investigation? Did he maybe hold the gun on his wife?
Right.
He claims that he doesn't remember, but he's claiming his wife's the hero. Is it a possibility that his wife could have grabbed the gun and it went off? That's another possibility.
That's why that physical evidence is so crucial. That's why if they did process that crime scene the way it should be processed, there should be something that can lead an investigator to a certain point where they could either say, this is not what happened, or this is what happened, or this is what the evidence shows us.
Now, it's kind of common practice. I mean, I've handled suicides as a resource officer, and in PIO, I handled suicide as a negotiator. I handled suicide, but you handled multiple suicides. Bill Haines, one of our police officers, he attempted suicide, and it was the same story. I think he lost his eye because when you're gonna shoot yourself in the head, you have a tendency at that split millimeter of a second to kind of flinch.
Right.
And that's where, I think what happened to Bill Haines.
Right. Yeah, that hesitation is almost like that cry of, I want to do this, I want to put it out that I want to do this, and at the last minute, I'm going to do this, I'm going to pull the trigger, but you really inside aren't fully committed, and then you do the flinch, and then you move. Because we've had other officers that have not flinched, and did go through with the event, the acting, and they just were intent on committing suicide.
Now, you wrote a few books. Can you share us your experience in the books that you wrote?
Absolutely.
And some novels as well?
Well, yeah, so this is interesting. So when I've enjoyed throughout my career to pass on knowledge. My whole thing was, and this was passed on to me, it would be a disservice to those that took the time to train me and teach me, for me not to invoke their names at one point or another, because I just didn't learn this job, this profession, this craft by osmosis. It just didn't come out of the air. So for me to keep the knowledge that was passed on to me and everything that I learned throughout my career and just let it die with me is a waste, because no one benefits from it. And I always thought that one day, let's just say a young investigator comes on the scene, does something and says, man, I remember Pepe once told me that if we did it like this, it would come in. And so I said, what a better way to get a young investigator started, at least have a base knowledge of investigations, than to just put it out there. And so with that, I wrote the Homicide Manifesto. the protocols of a violent crimes investigation. And what happens with this book is that you're able to, and even a layperson, when they see things on TV and they go, man, that doesn't look kind of, you can literally read the book and follow a case and say, okay, I can see where that goes. And I go everything from mental preparation to trial.
And this is something every police officer should have in the police academy. They should be required when they get out of the police academy in service training, because let's face it, it's not just the investigator, the first responder, the policeman that shows up on the scene first. That's one that can pretty much make it or break it in trial.
Truth be told, I always tell officers this, and sometimes investigators, and I tell them, the first officer on the crime scene, the first unit on a crime scene can make or break a case.
Correct.
And it's amazing to me that people don't grasp that.
And if somebody wanted to buy that book, where would they go?
This book, you can get it on Amazon. You can
The
get
Homicide Manifesto, okay.
Yes, you can get it on Barnes & Noble, order it. And
what is your cell phone number? Would you mind sharing that if they wanted to contact you as a guest speaker?
if they want to contact me, they can reach me at 786-972-1440. 786-972-1440, or you can go on my website, SkyMac Consulting, if they want to reach out. And then you were saying the novel. Then my first novel is Cry Tears of Blood.
And these novels are based on actual real homicides with kind of a little entertainment reading
Yes,
to keep
it's
the
true
reader
crime.
engaged.
It's in that true crime genre. It's a thriller. It's based on cases. I try to meld certain flavors, and a lot of it deals with Miami, right? So it is the way to go. You can pick this up also at Amazon, get it through Amazon or Barnes & Noble, and I can tell you that if I don't get 2 or 3 calls a week from those readers that have picked up the book and they say, Pepe, I can't believe that I couldn't put it down. I couldn't stop crying. That was so, thank you.
And you got another little trinket hiding down there?
No. This is just, I have that, you know what? It's, it's me as a,
You have to.
I always have a pad. I don't know why, it's just a habit that we always have. And I have that pad with me all the time.
And you don't see that. Rookies today, you don't see documentations. It's so important, even for a first responder, to describe that scene that they're on. As you know, I mentioned to you, I'll be putting in my paperwork to run for sheriff. So I'll be running for sheriff of Dade County. I'm looking forward to that. And that would be something that every officer is going to read when we become on board. And God bless Miami-Dade County, and God bless America. And hopefully, we will see what happens.
Listen, I think that you have that way of putting the information out there, and with your experience, there's no doubt in my mind that you'll be a very formidable candidate for that position.
Thank you, and definitely want to have you on some future podcasts.
Absolutely, my pleasure.